بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Today, inshallah, this week, and then the part 1 in details. We already took the first part, which was introduction, basic introduction to plants, different parts of the plants, how they function, and some of the hormones and their functions also. And so we are ready to continue this mission. Today, which is the second topic in the outline, it will be about gas exchange. Gas exchange means we'll be talking about three things: photosynthesis, respiration, and transpiration. Catch الموز ثاني مرة؟ إنزين. لا ما كاش. So this will be a short introduction لأنه شباب موجودين يعني. But it will be good enough for you to refresh your memory if you already forgot about gas exchange. Although this is related to other courses also in the you are taking now at this level. So let's get started. I already said before, through tree physiology, and it's a branch of plant sciences that deals with the function of the plant. Why this is important? Because we need to understand how the plant works, how it works, different organs, how the leaves works, what their function is, what's the role of the stem, what the roots do, how the fruits and the flowers develop. All of this is very important and all related to physiology. So physiology can be mostly related to what happens, functions, not the description of the plant part. When you say leaf, root, stem, shape, this shape or that shape, this is morphology. When you dissect the leaf and look from inside, this is called anatomy. When you study the function of those cells and tissues and organs, then you are talking about physiology. Physiology basically the study of the function of that organ or that plant part, whatever it is. It could be a tissue, it could be one cell, it depends. So why physiology is important to understand? Because if you understand physiology, you'll be able to manipulate how the plant grow to maturity, especially in fruit production. They are perennial trees. They stay there for a long time, more than 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. So understanding how they work and will allow you to manipulate them. So you have more yield, better quality. You also save money because, like when you do fruit production, it's not just like one season of vegetables or field crops. This is going to be a long-term work and it's going to be costly. It's going to take so many years for you to get back your money. So if you planted 1,000 trees, it's not like you planted 1,000 cucumbers. There's no comparable in terms of the cost, time to maturity, harvest, the processing. All this information is very important to understand. It takes a long time, it takes money, it takes labor to manage orchards, to manage trees, especially fruit trees. So for us to understand how they work, we need to understand what happens at the cellular level when the cell is produced from meristem, how it grow and divide, and then what happens when it becomes specialized or differentiated into different organs, basically the stems, the leaves, the roots, flowers, fruits, and seeds, how this whole thing happens, what drives it, what makes it happen. So this is the whole point of physiology and why physiology is very important. Now, in physiology also, different parts have different functions, as you already know. So now we talk about the functions, which is actually the study of physiology. So part of what you do in your research will be physiology, even if it is not a process. Photosynthesis physiology, respiration physiology, transpiration physiology, plant growth itself is physiology. And then you have cycles, phenological cycles, like flowering cycle, growth cycle, and so on. But these different parts of the plant do different things. And you already know, of course, almost all of them. The function of the leaf is obviously mainly to produce sugars through photosynthesis, also transpiration, exchange of water vapor between the plant and the atmosphere. This is the function of the leaf. And some other functions depending on the crop itself or the plant itself. But this is primarily what it does. The stem is mainly for conduction. Conduction means moving the nutrients that was made in the leaves to the different parts of the plant, including the roots. And also, it does the opposite, distribute water and nutrients from the roots to other parts of the plant. Besides, it supports the tree. Because support is very important. As the tree grows, it becomes bigger and bigger. It needs some support, so it works like the legs of the chair. So that's how they support the tree. That's for the stem. And then we have the roots. You know, the roots also help support or anchor the plant in the soil. And of course, absorb nutrients and minerals from the soil to the plant and make connection with mycorrhiza and a whole bunch of things that they are doing. But mainly, they are for anchoring, and also they are mainly for water and nutrient exchange, conduction. Then after, once the tree is mature, sometimes if you plant from seed, it's going to take a long time, 3, 5, some of the trees will take up to 10 years before they start flowering. So this stage is called juvenility, طفولة. So they are juvenile. They cannot produce fruits right away or flower right away. They have to go through this juvenility. وبعدين في transitional stage. After juvenility is finished, it goes to transitional stage, and then maturity. Maturity means the plant now can flower. Okay, so now it starts to flower, and that flowering is happens when the plant already mature. So how do we reduce this time? We don't want to waste 10 years, because if you grow mango from a seed, maybe it will take you like 7 to 10 years to see a mango flowering and producing fruits. So what do you think? How can we reduce this time? What do we do to mango to reduce the time? Shorten it, make it shorter.
Grafting.
Yeah. We don't plant from seed, basically. We plant it grafted. So, or in some trees, we plant from cuttings. And those cuttings and scions in general, they are already mature. We take them from mature branches or stems or twigs. If we take those cuttings or scions from juvenile part of the tree, they will also not produce flowers. They will still have to wait. So it's very important that you take, in case of cuttings and scions, mature part that's already flowering. And you already know the information. But you are right also, pruning can speed up the process of flowering. And we use it also in some crops, because the more you prune, the faster you bring the mature stems. Then if you leave it on its own without pruning, it's going to be a slow process, right? It's going to take a long time, branch after branch after branch. But if you prune it, all the buds will break, and each one will be a new bud, make a new stem. So that process will be a little bit faster, not too much faster, but at least in some cases, in some plants, speed up the maturity of the plant so they flower faster. Once they flower, there is a whole set of processes that takes it from flowering, pollination, fertilization, and after fertilization, embryo development, and then seed development, and then seed, of course, growth, and finally desiccation of the seed, so it becomes partially dried, and then it becomes the embryo inside the seed with the induced sperm around it, become ready for planting and making a completely new plant, and thus will continue the life cycle of the tree. So it starts with the seed, and then it ends up with the seed. Right? We can shorten this process by, as you said, by cutting or scion grafting. You can also do pruning. And in some cases, we can also apply certain chemicals like hormones, speed up this process. But the most common one is just do a cutting, and then you plant the tree in 1 or 2 years. you already have some fruits in your fruit trees. So that's basically different parts in general and what they do. تكون موجودة اونلاين. تعال هذه قصدك شو ما اعطوني هيك كذا
من فوق دكتور
Okay, and I have it here as a speaker view. يفضل هذا يكون full view. أنا أشوف من هناك. تمام. So the core process, the most important process in the whole of this world is one process. It's called photosynthesis, where the humans have nothing to do with it. It's all natural. Because of that one process, which is photosynthesis, every part of this life can happen. If that process stops, nothing will happen. Everything will vanish. And that's why people are concerned when there is any change that will lead to any irregularities in photosynthesis. So they become anxious, worried. Because this not only gives us oxygen, but also gives us food, this wood, all your clothes, everything in your life dependent on photosynthesis. This is the most important process. So inshallah, this lecture and next lecture will be more details on will be more details. But now I'll give you introduction to these gas exchange processes, which is basically photosynthesis, respiration, and transpiration. And they are called gas exchange because one form or gas or another is exchanged during this process. In photosynthesis, there's more than one thing. CO2, of course, but also oxygen and water. They are exchanged between, why they call it exchange, تبادل. So when it goes in and when it goes out. So CO2 goes inside the plant. In exchange, oxygen goes out. We breathe oxygen, right? And water goes in from the roots. It comes out from the leaf. And that is transpiration. It's also part of photosynthesis. Respiration is the opposite. Oxygen is absorbed. CO2 is released. Okay, so many people think trees or plants only do photosynthesis, they only absorb CO2. Of course, that's wrong. Plants do absorb oxygen, but at much lower rate than CO2. Plants cannot survive without oxygen. They cannot survive, of course, they produce their own oxygen. But if you don't have oxygen in the atmosphere, then you have a problem respiring. The process of exchange of oxygen is called respiration, CO2, photosynthesis, and water, transpiration. In general, and there's more than one gas, like you know. This is in general. These are the three basic processes, physiological processes that happen in the plant. That makes it a plant. So it can grow and develop, produce flowers, fruits, and seeds. You need these three essential processes. So photosynthesis, you all know photosynthesis. Everybody knows what photosynthesis is. تركيب الضوئي. And then we'll get into تفاصيل أكثر يعني in the coming lecture. Because today is only introduction. What happens is very simple thing. أنا ما فاهم لليوم بعد ما قدروا يسووا في اللاب. It's very basic. Just bring CO2 with light, and then you have sugar. Very simple, yani. It's not complicated. Everybody knows how it is. So it's a very simple thing. It's just CO2, which is available in the atmosphere. We see it, global warming, CO2 increase. But actually, a few decades ago, we were happy that CO2 was increasing. CO2 is increasing. Now they change the equations. So dangerous and climate change and global warming. But before, when I was studying at Cornell, 1990s, my professor was doing experiment on enriching the trees with CO2. يعني هم يريدوا أصلاً زيادة CO2. Now CO2, whoa, big alarm, there is CO2 in the atmosphere. Actually, CO2 is good for the plants. It's not bad. The more CO2, the better. Because the more CO2 means the plant can do more photosynthesis. So what's wrong with CO2? Nothing is wrong with it. But of course, there's a limit how much CO2 can the plant absorb. But at this level that we are in now, it's fine. We don't have a problem. So plants need carbon dioxide to make that sugar that will be used for all functions of the plant. Basically, it makes food. عشان كده اسمه النبات is autotrophic. Autotrophic means the plant can make its own food, autotrophs. If it doesn't, like animals, they are heterotrophs. So autotrophic is organisms like plants, algae, ما له plant other kinds of like algae الطحالب وغيرها كانوا كلهم plant لكن توزعوهم كلهم واحد مملكة بوه. Certain types of bacteria, certain types of fungi, any plant that can do photosynthesis, they are called autotrophics. Along that process, when they don't actually do this, they don't absorb CO2 to produce oxygen. The plants absorb CO2 to produce food for their own growth. Like as a byproduct, you have oxygen. Who needs oxygen? But the product of photosynthesis. Who uses it? The plant uses part of it. Every other living organism. Everyone. Fish, birds, humans, all kinds of wild or domestic animals, insects, worms, everything. They all need oxygen. So all this, that's why this process is very important. It gives you two things. It gives you energy and it gives you air. Without these two things, you cannot survive as a planet. So this is what makes everything alive and support each other. Now when we also breathe oxygen, we produce CO2. So we give the plants back some of the what we take. We take oxygen, we give them CO2. So each one is balanced. The whole universe is balanced. We are happy. But what happens if you have less and less plants? You have also less and less oxygen, and less all other things that depend on oxygen. All plants, including sea algae, including seaweeds, including حتى نباتات اللي في البحر يعني mangrove, whatever they are, all these are all considered plants. So if all of them suffer, then every other thing will suffer too. So this is very important that we balance the environment and that we live in. So we exchange CO2 and oxygen peacefully without a problem for a long time. Because every time you balance one or the other, you have a problem. So this is basically photosynthesis, the most important process in the world. The basic function is just take CO2, make some energy, and release oxygen. Oxygen is used by all other organisms. Okay, so where that energy comes from for photosynthesis? It's all natural. There's nothing, you don't do anything unnatural with energy, unless you want to in a greenhouse or the forfeits with the light. But all the energy comes from the sun in the form of light to carry out the photosynthesis. So it doesn't need anything, basically, it's free. Everything is free to start this process. Okay? And at the end, it will produce you sugar. There's nothing more interesting than that. So this plant is capable of using CO2 from the atmosphere and run the process with solar energy. الطاقة الشمسية اللي هو احنا كنا نحاول نستخدمها. He was using it for a long time. The plants are using it. They produce that food which is called sugar or starch, sucrose, and then that will run the whole plant process to allow it to grow and develop. This happens in something called chloroplasts inside the plants, and these chloroplasts have a pigment called chlorophyll there are also other pigments in the plant, but primarily for photosynthesis, it is chlorophyll. Okay, because chlorophyll itself is not just one pigment. Actually, it is more than one pigment. Chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and carotene, and so on. But the main, it's chlorophyll that does the capture of the light and the process of photosynthesis. And because it captures the light, that's why the plant is green. And the reason for chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, because the light is spectral. The light is not just one color. And if you see a rainbow, you know that there is a whole range of colors in the sky. You don't see it now, but you see it. The plant sees it. And so it absorbs in two regions. Usually it is between 400 and 700 nanometers. So in the upper region and the lower region, infrared and ultraviolet, two extremes. The part that is not absorbed by the plant is the green light, and that's why the plant looks like green. The plant is green because it doesn't absorb green. And the same thing goes for everything. This is red because the light here is not being absorbed. Every other spectrum of the light is being absorbed. That's why this is red, and so on. So that's what it is. Those plants are green because they don't absorb the green color, and you'll see it later, inshallah, in the spectrum of light. So this is basically the chloroplast. This is how it's made. It's very simple factory. That's where everything happens. The main structure is the grana, which is here. Single one is grana, more than like bacteria. This is grana means grana. All of these are grana. 1, 2, 3, 4 in this case. And then we have these stromas. And we have the thylakoids, which are here, and the lumens, and then they are all covered in the inner and outer membrane. Very simple structure, it's not complicated. So this is the layers, and this is the grana and thylakoids. Very basic structure, it's not complicated. And this is where chlorophyll is stored, and also where photosynthesis happens. So now photosynthesis, we'll get to it inshallah in maybe more details in the next lecture, but it is more than one step. There's light reaction, and there's the dark reaction, there's photosystem 1, photosystem 2, and there is Calvin cycle. So there are some details that are very interesting, and this is only the basics, the basic idea of photosynthesis. So again, photosynthesis in simplest form, you take water. Water can be taken mostly by the roots, being transported to the leaf, and from the leaf to the cell, to the chloroplast. CO2 from the atmosphere through the stomata. With the light that comes from the sun, inside the chlorophyll, the plant makes sugar, which is C6H12O6, plus as an outcome, 6 molecules of oxygens and 6 of water. So besides, the plant takes water, but it also releases water in this process. But it takes 12, it releases half of that, 6. So even that, the plant is very economical in terms of water. It doesn't use all the water, but even inside the chloroplast, it doesn't use all the water, half of it. Okay, so if you count how many C's, you can actually do this. 6 carbons here, 12 hydrogen, and then the oxygen is divided between the two. This is 12, and that is 1, and then you have 6, and 6, 12, and there's 1. So you end up with sugar, oxygen, and water. You start with CO2 and water. Basically, you start with CO2 and end up with sugar. In a very simple, straightforward process. What affects the photosynthesis? How fast? The rate is how much photosynthesis the plant does over time, because this changes in the morning, in the afternoon. It's not the same. It's because it's affected by so many things. Some of the factors that affect photosynthesis include light intensity, how much light is there. During the daytime, when the light is bright, that's the maximum photosynthesis. But at night, in the afternoon, at night, there's no photosynthesis. So the quality of light and the brightness of light is very important. If it is cloudy, it will be less. If it's direct sun, it will be more. So that's the intensity of the light. شدة الإشعاع, شدة الضوء. And you can measure this, by the way. By instruments, we can measure it. Also, the temperature is very important. At very low temperature, activity, of course, is reduced, especially of enzymes and also of proteins. And so the temperature at very low or below zero or near zero there's virtually no photosynthesis in most plants. Also, when it gets very high, above 35 degrees, above 40 degrees, then most plants will not, especially for trees, especially tropical ones, will not be able to tolerate that high temperature. So also photosynthesis will suffer. The best temperature for photosynthesis to work is around 18 to 30 degrees, between maybe 15 to 30 degrees. That's a good range for most plants. Below that, the photosynthesis will start to slow down. The colder it gets, the slower it gets. Also above 30, it will go slow. So that's why the peak winter and the peak summer is not a good time to do anything. And you don't see much growth happening during this time, during the summer and during the winter. Okay, because photosynthesis can be stopped completely if it is too cold or too hot. Also, of course, you need CO2. If you don't have CO2, there will be no photosynthesis. This is obvious. That's why we think more CO2 is better, because the more CO2 you have, the more photosynthesis you get. Okay, so this is actually true. Also, if there is less CO2, then you will have less photosynthesis. So that's the basics of photosynthesis. The next process that's very important that happens also everywhere. Photosynthesis usually in plants and also some algae and others that do have chloroplasts and they have chlorophyll. That's where photosynthesis happens, autotrophics, right? But respiration happens everywhere in all organisms. Humans, birds, fish, animals, plants, whatever, all of them. Still, the plants is better than the rest of other organisms in respiration, because plant has two types of respiration: aerobic and anaerobic, which means respiration in the presence of oxygen and respiration in the lack of oxygen. But respiration itself happens in every organism. Every organism needs respiration. So respiration is international, right? Respiration. Okay. In photosynthesis, we had CO2, will give us sugar, water, and oxygen, right? And this oxygen goes here, and we use that with sugar to give us what? Energy. All of us need energy. Why do we need energy? Yeah, to grow. Without energy, you cannot grow. You can't function. You will stop completely. And that's why if you don't have enough food, you are so hungry, lifetime, nothing grows, nothing moves. Slowly, you are losing it. And people cannot survive a long time without food. They will just die. So, same thing goes for all other organisms, of course. Without energy, you can't do much. Nothing will work. Nothing will function. Not your heart, not your brain, nothing. So, it's a cycle, right? And then you get energy, and then also you get, again, CO2 that goes back here again. So that's why life is balanced. Somebody provides oxygen or CO2. Okay, so respiration basically happens everywhere. All cells. As long as it's alive, it does respiration. Humans or non-humans. And they do that by using oxygen and release CO2. Of course, besides the CO2, they produce energy. Energy also comes in certain chemicals. Not energy is something comes in the humans or animals or plants, ATPs and NADPH and so on. These are the forms of energy. So the energy inside the cell is actually chemical energy. It's called chemical energy. The petrol, right? Which runs your car. It's the same thing. It's a chemical energy. What's the energy that started? Remember, when we get CO2, yes, solar energy. What is it? It's not chemical. It's physical. So besides giving us food for energy, the plants do convert solar physical energy, light, general light, that your body cannot use because the energy outside, right? Why can't you just go outside and get your energy from the sun, like in plants? That's physical energy, you can't use it. You need chemical energy. And you cannot get physical energy from outside. You have to go through some cycle. Somebody has to do it for you. And that somebody who has to do it for you is the plant. So the plant not only gives you energy, it gives you chemical energy that you can use. Because there is energy there. If the plant tomorrow decided not to give you chemical energy, you'll also be dead. Because you cannot use physical energy. You have to use chemical energy. So it's a problem for us humans. And that's why we are dependent also in plants. You cannot just survive without plants. So they produce here energy, but in this case, it's chemical energy. Okay? When does photosynthesis happen? Remember, photosynthesis is dependent on many factors, right? We just mentioned in the slide before this one. One of them, first one, is the light intensity and the light itself. If there is light, there is photosynthesis. If there's dark, nothing. Because why do you need the light? You need the light for energy. Or the light is not enough. Small bulb, it's not enough. It doesn't give you enough energy. So you need actually energy from the light. If there is no light, you'll have no energy to start working. Physical energy is not there. But respiration, because it is a chemical energy that's been used, the plant gave to you from the sugars, you can use that all the time, day and night. The plant functions all the time, you function all the time, animals, birds, insects, worms, whatever they are. They all function all the time. And the reason for that is because the energy is always available, because it is in the form of chemical energy. So respiration, unlike photosynthesis, is not limited by light. It is not limited by temperature. It's not limited by so many things. And so it can be, it's not limited, of course, by CO2. But it is limited by not CO2. What is it? Limited by what? Respiration. The gas. Oxygen. Because it needs oxygen to run. Remember always that respiration uses oxygen. Photosynthesis uses CO2. So the limitation here is oxygen. If you have no oxygen, if I close your nose for just 3 seconds, you cannot breathe, you will stop functioning. Why? That's the reason, because you can't actually survive even for 1 minute without oxygen. Forget about all the other things. You can't do it. The plant can, though, by the way. Because if the plant cannot have oxygen, what do? They have another option, plan B, anaerobic respiration. They don't need oxygen. Or they use their own oxygen. But we cannot do that. We have to live on oxygen. Tamam? So this is respiration. So this is what happens basically. We have water in from the roots. That's why the plant structure is very important to understand. The root system absorbs the water, and that's the main function of the root. And the root anchor the plant in the soil. Of course, it's a big tree, like we study tree physiology. So there are huge trees, like mango, like all these trees. They will have to have a good root system that hold them in place. So that's one function of the root, but the other main function is absorption of water and nutrients. That goes on from here. And then it goes through the plant, through the stem. So the water comes in from the root, and then it leaves the plant from the leaves. So intake by the root, output from the leaves. Okay. How much water is lost? Of all the water taken up by the root, how much is lost? From the leaves. How much is used in the plant and how much is lost? إذا عندي 100 لتر امتصت الجذور, how much is left in the plant? How much is used actually for growth and photosynthesis? Half? Inside the cell. But here in the whole plant. Is all the water absorbed by the roots used by the plant? How much is used? Less than 10%. 90% of it goes to the atmosphere. Very little is used actually. The rest is gone. Comes from the root, goes from the other door. This is the root, comes in, that's the leaf, goes out. So why do we plant absorb so much water and it's actually not using it for photosynthesis or anything for that matter, not only photosynthesis. Some plants only use 1%. 99% of it is wasted, is lost, is gone. Because water movement is not just movement of water. There is also movement of minerals and other chemicals, including hormones, either from the environment, from the soil inside the plant, or from within the plant, like hormones, like cytokinin produced in the root, will have to go, but it's being carried out by this water. So the water is a transport vehicle, وسيلة نقل, not just only the water for itself, and also it maintains the plant in its state, which is called turgid state. Okay, we'll get to that inshallah. So that's what happened to the water. It goes from here, it goes out from there. After you harvest the fruit, this process still continues to happen. Of course, this process, as I said, it's called transpiration. Transpiration. So that's what happens, transpiration, which is the loss of water from the plant or from the fruit. So even after harvest, you need to understand that respiration is still happening, transpiration is still happening, and in some cases, even photosynthesis is still happening for some time. So you need to provide the environment that will make this fruit stay there for a long time after you finish, after harvest. It's called post-harvest treatments. Because the plant is still a living organism. Even you carry it from the mother plant, it's still alive. So it's still doing all the things that living organisms do, like photosynthesis, respiration, transpiration. Photosynthesis, if it has the green leaves, it will still do it. Respiration, of course, is happening all the time. Until the last day, respiration happens. And you know the fruits are two different types. One is called climatic, and one is non-climatic. And the difference is in respiration rate. Non-climatic slowly, like this banana, slowly losing its, its structure basically until senescence. So it respires slowly. Climatic, they also slowly respire, but before senescence, there's a peak. And so those different story, but it's related because respiration happens in every part of the plant and every cell. So you have to understand there is also different classes of fruits depending on transpiration, climatic and non-climatic. So basically that's what happens. So in the process of photosynthesis, oxygen is released in the atmosphere and also inside the plant, not only in the atmosphere. The oxygen is also released inside the plant. But also in respiration, oxygen is taken inside these cells and used to burn sugars and generate energy. Okay, and of course in that process also making water. So after this, a product of respiration, of course, taking up oxygen and CO2 is released. وهي الفكره العامه انه النباتات فقط ما عندها شغله غير تمتص ثاني اكسيد الكربون وخلاص. لا النبات يمتص ايضا اكسجين والعكس يطلع اكسجين وايضا يطلع CO2. بس هي نسبه ratio. What's the ratio of how much CO2 is taken up? Mostly the plant what is doing taking up CO2 and releasing oxygen. But can the plant takes oxygen and also release CO2? Yes, of course. Because if you reverse the photosynthesis equation, it's just the opposite. Burn the sugar, release CO2, and release water. Water is used in and out. Water is mediator for all the chemical actions. وسيط. Okay, so don't think that plants don't release CO2. Only they release oxygen. No, they do release CO2 and also they release oxygen. But it is not comparable to oxygen. They also take up oxygen, not only CO2. They also take up oxygen. So this is very important. Plants also take up water and they release water. There are two types of water. The water that comes directly through the plant is released outside, and the water that's product of chemical reactions that's also being released. So there are two sources of water in the plant. So basically, this is the equation, which is the opposite of photosynthesis. You have the sugar there, and with oxygen, a process that can happen all the time, as I said, it gives you energy, water, and CO2. Right? And also, if you reverse this, if this was reversed, what is this? It's photosynthesis. It's the same. The difference is this, the energy. There, it is physical energy from the sun. Here, it is chemical energy. So it can be used by whoever is using the sugar. The plant, the humans, the animals, everyone. Everyone is using it. So basically, respiration, in a way, it is the inverse of photosynthesis, the opposite of photosynthesis. And to compare them both, this is a short table. In photosynthesis, sugar, which is our token for energy, basically called food, non-food, is produced. In respiration, the same sugar that's produced here is used to produce energy. So here, energy is used to produce food. There, food is used to produce energy. So energy is stored, energy is released. Captured, released. Capture the energy from the sun, physical, release chemical energy. This happens only where chloroplast exists. It can be in the leaves, it can also be in the stem or even the fruit. If it's green, it has chloroplast, why not? It happens, right? So it happens wherever there is chloroplast and there's chlorophyll, this happens. There happens in all cells. So once you make it, you make the food, what do? You start to spread it in all the cells. The root, the stem, the seeds, the fruits, the flowers, everyone gets their share. And that's how it's transported to all, and that's why respiration happens in all cells, not just one type of cell. In photosynthesis, we use carbon dioxide and release oxygen, right? Here is the opposite. We use oxygen and release carbon dioxide. This is in general, in the process itself. In both cases, actually, water is used and produced. In both cases, you have water here and you have water there. But in order for you to carry out photosynthesis, you need water. CO2 is not enough. CO2 and sun is not enough. If you have no water, you have no photosynthesis. You have no photosynthesis, you have no sugar, you have no water. So if you want water, give me water. I'll give you water. So water is used here. I will give you water if you give me water. If you give me water, I'm not going to give you water, right? And that water comes with energy. This, because it is light dependent, of course, this happens only whenever there is light, photosynthesis. And if there is no light, there will be no photosynthesis. And this happens all the time, day and night. Whether you're sleeping or you're awake, photosynthesis and respiration happens. Another process that belongs to gas exchange is called transpiration. This is strictly only about water. It's not about any other gases. The other two processes is about gases and water. But transpiration is only about water. Water vapor, basically. And transpiration or water loss happen in the field in two ways. One that is from the plant, it is called transpiration, and also from the soil directly, and that's called evaporation. النتح والبخر. So both of these two are used to determine how much water is lost from the soil, and based on that, you can use it for irrigation. And that has one term, very simple term. When we talk about water loss from the soil and the plant, we measure water loss using an equation, and we call this ET. ET. E stands for evaporation, and T transpiration. Basically, this is water lost from the plant and water loss from the media, soil or grown media or peat moss, whatever it is. So we have ET, water loss from the plant, transpiration, water loss from the soil, and there's a long story for this one that we'll get inshallah in the second part about water movement in the plant. Okay? Where the water loss happens, who controls water? In the plant, who controls water movement? The leaf or the root?
Leaf. Absorption.
Yes.
Both of them.
you need some way of communication. But actually, the leaf is the one that controls. The control is the leaf, because how the water is lost from the plant.
Stomata.
Mostly from the stomata. It's also lost through the cuticle, but very, very little. And compared to stomata, is nothing. But the regulation happens at the stomata. Stomata or stomate is the one that controls water loss. The plant is working hard not to allow the water to leave the plant from any other source other than the stomata. It can escape from the leaf through the stem, but the plant has measures in place, including the cuticle and the wax, so it doesn't escape from any other part except from the stomata. Why? Why do you think the plant wants all the water to go through the stomata? Even though it loses 90%, but it doesn't want to leave from every hole here and there. No, you want it to go through the stomata. That's called regulation. And stress. يعني انت في الحكومه يعني you want some regulation, you want some rules. ما تريد كل واحد يعني طاق من صوت. You can't control it. You want it controlled. So this process has to be controlled. Right? You cannot control it if you allow it to escape from wherever you want. It has to go through the door. And that's why we are controlled here, because we have doors. You can't just escape from the window. You can't do that. So what the university did, you can't actually, they close the windows. Same thing for plants. If it is allowed, it will escape from anywhere. But no, you cannot. You have to go through the door. So the door for water from the plant is actually stomata. So it has to go through the stomata. As I mentioned before, the plant loses more than, not just 90, more than 90% of what it takes, because the water movement in the plant is not just about drinking water. It is about movement of nutrients and chemicals from outside and throughout, from inside the plant, through the plant, all of it, through the plant. Okay, so some of that is used, but most of it is not being used. So it's very important to understand that not all the water the plant drinks is actually needed, just like you. Okay, you don't keep all the liquids that you drink, right? So that's what happens in plants. Okay, so basically this is how the water is moving through here, and when there is plenty of water in the root zone, that's why it's a process controlled, then it's full of water. There's no problem. Water will flow, the stomata is open, the water continuously flow without an issue. So that's the transpiration, basically. But as I mentioned, it's not just drinking water for photosynthesis. It's also about transporting minerals from the soil and also from the plant itself, different cells, different chemicals, through the plant, all the way to different, through the plant means every part of the plant. The trunk, the new part, the new flower, the fruits, it's all moving around using the water that's moving from the root to outside to the atmosphere. And that's called soil, plant, atmosphere, water continuum. So it goes from the root, this is the root here, the stem, the leaf, the atmosphere, here's the soil, so the water goes from here, and it leaves here to the atmosphere. It goes out there, forms a cloud, it rains again back to the soil, and the cycle continues. So this water that moves through the plant, different parts of the plant, also moves along with it all the nutrients. That's one function, of course. There are other functions. When it is too hot, the plant transpire more, like you. يتعرق أكثر يكون حرارة. ليش؟ عشان يبرد جسمك. The same thing, this function is also existing in the plant, and it is driven by transpiration. So transpiration is cooling the plant. Another reason, of course, moving sugars and plant chemicals and maintaining turgor pressure. You know that already. Maintaining turgor pressure, though, is very important. What makes the plant stand is turgor pressure. If we lost turgor pressure, we lost it. Turgor. Okay. So it's full, standing full. يعني احنا عندنا skeleton, right? So that holds us. But the leaves don't have skeletons. If they lost water, they will wilt. What makes them not wilt? Like the leaves stand the way they are. The turgor pressure. Their cells are full of water. And that's when the structure of the cell allows it to stand up because they're all full. ففكر انه كانه بالونات يعني بتماسكه منفوخه. بس when you release the air, they start to shrink. So البالون شكله without air. The same for target cells. When they are full of water, they stay like a real cell. شوف هذه شكلها كيف؟ ساعات حاب رجولها ويدينها. that's a cell. That's fully target تروح معي امورها طيب. It loses water and start to shrink. In this case, we call this flaccid. This is called target, and this is flaccid. Flaccid means the بالون خلاص بلف الهواء and start to shrink. Shrink, which is here wilting. The water is lost, it's wilting, start to roll. And rolling of the leaf is actually adaptation. So if you look at the leaf, it's fine as long as it's full of water. Here is a leaf that's meant to survive today. It is standing. There's no problem standing because it's full of water. After some time, this leaf is not going to stand. It's going to roll like this, and then it's going to wilt. When it is, used to be already started actually. When it is fine, it was full of water because the water is continuous, remember. It is turgid. And now when it loses water, it is called flaccid, and it starts to wilt. The process of wilting itself is adaptation to water loss. It tries to minimize water loss by wilting. How wilting minimize water loss? wilting طبعا هي علامة إن النبات يحتاج ماء صح؟ But the wilting itself, the plant wilts. Why? Yes. شوف surface area now. Before it used to be like this. Right? Large surface area. So all the water is coming out from all over. When it is wilting, it's going to be like this. So surface area now, see this one is now wilted. So the surface area now is less than one by 50%, 20%, and so on. So reduced surface area. That means what? This water loss. Why? This surface area means this water loss.
Because the plants use that water, so
yeah, it wants to keep it, but surface area. If you go outside now in the sun, what happens to the surface area? It's largely exposed, so it will continue to lose water. Remember, water loss is through stomata primarily, but it can also be lost through here, other part of the plant by diffusion. Okay, so it can lose it. So if you are open, then the heat and the wind and the dry air will make it lose more water. And it doesn't have water in the roots, remember. It cannot compensate this water, that's why it's wilting. So the wilting itself is trying to reduce the water loss. That's one thing. When it wilts, you can see this. When it wilts, also something happens. Reduce surface area خلاص. It also rolls. Look, Yalsa. Why?
Reduce the
searching for
simulated to keep the moisture.
Where?
Stomata.
Yes, stomata is here at the bottom, not at the top. It's called a daxial part of the leaf. Abaxial or daxial. So the stomatas are primarily here. That means if I roll it, I'm closing the gap like this and creating a small microclimate inside here that is humid. So when you create this humid region, less water will actually escape to the atmosphere without the plant doing any energy. So this rolling itself reduces by creating something called, of course, increases humidity. It's called boundary layer, thick boundary layer. So the diffusion of water from the leaf to the atmosphere is becoming reduced because I'm now creating a humid environment here by folding. So that's why the leaves always fold downward. It doesn't fold upward. If it falls upward, it exposes most of matter to the atmosphere. But what it does, it's fall downward, just like this. Okay? So that's some of the techniques the plant's doing if it is under water stress. And this water stress can be of two types. When the plant is wilted, is two types. Wilting leaves. What do you call those two types? This wilting, leaf wilting. Yes. Temporary wilting point and permanent wilting point. سمعتوا عن permanent wilting point before? Permanent means what? It does not recover. It stays like this because there is no water in the soil. It cannot get more water. The only way for this to survive now is to irrigate it. Temporary. When this happens, temporary wilting point, what is it? متى يصير؟ It has nothing to do with the water in the soil. It can happen even if there is water in the soil. Temporary wilting. Temporary wilting happens during the daytime now, at noon. And the reason for that is the rate of movement of water from the soil to the roots is slower than the rate of water movement from the leaf to the atmosphere. So the atmosphere is either too hot, too sunny like now, or the air is windy or too dry. This kind of environment makes water loss so fast. Remember, the roots know there is water down there, but it cannot keep up. يعني كمية الامتصاص الماء من التربة أبطأ، ما مواكبة كمية الماء المفقود من الأوراق. وذلك temporarily to control this process, of course, it does also well. But this is temporary. This is just to slow down water loss. يعني مستعجل الوضع. Water is lost. If it folds itself again temporarily مؤقتا إلين ما شوية الافترنود شوية تنزل الشمس الحرارة تبرد شوية. And then water from the soil continues to come, fills up, become turgid again, and this is now finished. So temporary wilting point is just that, temporary. And of course, because high temperature is high, low humidity, high wind also can contribute to that, and high light intensity. So all these factors, environmental factors, makes the water loss from the leaves quicker, faster than water absorbed from the roots. So that's what happens actually. Is there any water in the soil? Yes, there is water in the soil. So why is wilting? Because the rate of water lost from the leaves is a lot faster than the amount of water absorbed by the roots. ما قال تعوض. وغالبا تكون شجرة كبيرة يعني وما ملحقة. In extreme heat, if the heat is too high, when this happens, what happens to the leaves? If it is hot in summer, there is water, remember, in the soil. But now the plant cannot keep up. It's too hot. What happens when the plant is when it is too hot?
Well,
what happens to you when it's too hot? You start to lose عرق أكثر. وبعد كده مش there's no more water to sweat. صح لا؟ ويجيك حرارة تصير محتار يجيك اسمه heat stroke. تجيك heat stroke, heat stroke, and then you can die from heat stroke because your body cannot cool you down. The same thing happens here. If the heat is generated is too much, way too hot, water is lost so fast, then what happens to this? It will go wilting, right? It cannot keep up. What's one process, one important role of transpiration? Cooling the plant. If you cannot cool it, what did happen to it? It will just be burned. It will be fried by the heat. And so you see in the summer, even here on campus, some plants have random, ما له pattern معين. لكن you see the leaves are burned alive. Burned alive because they cannot transpire. There is no water. There is water in soil. People are irrigating, but it's not keeping up. The plant cannot keep up. So we lost one function of transpiration, which is cooling the plant, and that led to plant being burned. It's way too hot. It's not directly burned because of the heat. It is directly burned because of the high temperature of the leaf itself. It cannot be cooled. So the plants that are desert plants, they adapt to this kind of climate. They don't have these white leaves. الغاف والسمر والستر ما عمره ورقه صغار ورقه. Thick cuticle, well adapted to this kind of climates. 40, 50, 60, it doesn't matter. It will survive. But these beautiful ornamentals will not be able to make it. Or even tropical plants in desert climate cannot. Because one function of the water is lost already. So you have permanent wilting, you have temporary wilting, and you have burning of the leaves in the extreme cases of high temperature and wind and so on. So that's what basically turgid and flaccid means. When plants don't have enough water, turgid pressure is lost, and the plants start to wilt. This wilting can be temporary or permanent. Okay, so this is a summary of what happens during the heat and water loss. Water is taken up by the roots to the stem and then used by the leaves. So this process of water loss is very important. Transpiration is extremely important because it's not just only to drink water, but for all the other factors and the process that happens to the leaf and the plant, and this is highly regulated. Inshallah, we'll get to the detail of that. So what factors affect transpiration? This is the one we just talked about. One of them is temperature, the most important, temperature. Because of temperature, the leaf will roll and they go through permanent or temporary wilting. So temperature is very important. The kinetic energy of water molecule, they diffuse faster during high temperature. So higher temperature means what happens to transpiration? More or less, if you increase the temperature. Transpiration. How about evaporation? Same. Cold water is not losing much in the atmosphere. But if it is boiling, what happens to it? It's all gone in 1 minute. So the more heat you have, the more water lost to the atmosphere. Whether it is transpiration or evaporation, basically what happens is the temperature increases the kinetic energy, the movement of water molecules, and breaking down of all the bonds, and then they transfer from liquid to vapor phase, evaporation. So that's what happens in temperature. How about when there is high wind? Does that increase or reduce the transpiration? Transpiration, yes. High wind. It will also increase it. Because of what? Because this is where both sides actually, but more here. And that's why it's folding. The stomata is here, so they release water. How do they release water? They just open, like we saw before, and the water leaves through the stomata. Then it leaves the leaves through the stomata, right? And now, it doesn't just go out to the atmosphere, right? Because there are so many thousands and thousands of stomata here. All of them are releasing water vapor. What happens here? This area becomes humid. There is a layer between the actual stomata here and the atmosphere. See, all these stomata now releasing water, right? And this is the atmosphere. This layer is called boundary layer. And if there is wind, these layers become thinner and thinner. That means water is lost faster and faster. The thicker the boundary layer, the less water lost from the leaf and also from this layer, because it doesn't go out from the stomata directly to the atmosphere. It forms a layer called boundary layer, allowed to diffuse from the leaf to the atmosphere. If the atmosphere is drier, that means the loss of water will be from the leaf will be faster or slower. If the atmosphere is drier, means it has less water molecules, less saturated with water vapor. That means it will be faster because the water moves just like in diffusion from high concentration to low concentration. So drier, wet, the water will move from the wet to the dry. It's not the other way around. That's why if you have high humidity, what happens? More transpiration or less transpiration? High humidity, it will be less. The more humid the atmosphere, the less transpiration. Because الجو أصلا مزدحم water molecules, there's no room for the new vapor to go out. So high humidity is also a problem. In certain crops, we cannot cultivate them because of high humidity, not because of high temperature. Summer is high temperature, but we also have high humidity. So this stream is not moving. The soil, plant, atmosphere continuum is not moving. So concentration of water molecules outside the leaf in the air is with higher humidity, it's higher. With lower humidity, the concentration of water molecules in the atmosphere is low. And so more diffusion. So steeper concentration gradient for diffusion. That means the water will escape right away from the leaf to the atmosphere because it's drier. And the opposite is true. If the humidity is high, transpiration is going to be low because this water movement is going to be slower. So humidity is also a major factor in transpiration. Anything has to do with water is always important. How about light? Is light also a factor for transpiration? If you have high light intensity, what happens? If you have high light or during the daytime, stomata is open. Because for what? For photosynthesis. What happened to the water? It will run also out. So what's the trick for the plant? What's the challenge? To balance. What's the advantage? There's one advantage. The plant can understand, and you don't. Now we have high light. The plant has to do photosynthesis, right, in order for it to survive. But at the same time, the water will run away, and you want to use it for photosynthesis. How can you keep it? Yeah, partial closure of the stomata, not full closure, because the water molecules are larger than CO2. The plant will just close it just a little bit, right? This will allow the CO2 and oxygen to go out and in, but it will not allow the water to go out. This happens, of course, during midday, during the temporary wilting, and also during water stress. The plant will start to close the stomata. And that's why the plant wants all the water to leave the plant from the stomata, not from the cuticle, not from the stem, and not from any other place. We want to go through the gate. Because we can partially close the gate, so Khalid can escape, but I cannot. So, why? Size matters. أنا من معي تراك. That's what happens here. So they close the gate, not to open it, just open just enough. So the smaller molecule of CO2 and oxygen will leave and go and come, but water cannot leave. That's what happens. And then, of course, there are terms for this, like including osmotic adjustment. Osmotic adjustment لما النبات يعاند يطنش ثابت الماء. Right? No, we'll just continue. We cannot sacrifice photosynthesis. لأنه بعد فترة يعني you have to allow the water to leave also. Right? You cannot just keep all the water. You cannot cool it down. You can't do many things. You cannot get water from the soil. And so certain plants like mango go through something called osmotic adjustment. Osmotic adjustment يعني they sacrifice, they stay open. We have to continue at maximum photosynthesis. We cannot lose. ليش هم متأملين إن الماء بيجي؟ يعني they have like idea. No water will come. يعني مزارع يشوفنا spring شيء يعني something will happen. أمطار بتستوي. So لأن especially these plants are adapted to climate where there is rainfall naturally happens all the time. The mango is tropical. So I mean even if it's 1, 2, 3 days ما في rain, the fourth day will come. Yeah man. We have a problem نحن ما بالهند. هم اسمهم جفرة إنديكا. They are not in India anymore. There's no tropical climate. When is the rain happening? You don't see the rain only once a day, once a year. Yeah. So this strategy is not working for them. And so the mango, when it dries, you can see it. لاحظوا يعني. It completely dries. لأنه يسحب نفسه وفجأة يموت. It dries completely. عشان كده المانجو قليل ما تشوف فرق اصفر. تشوفه أخضر وفجأة wilted and dried. لأنه كان متأمل إن حد يسقي يعني. أو الأمطار تنزل. ما كان عارف إنه هو كمان. أملنا عادة تاخذ وقت.
لا يكون سبب العيب.
إي والله ممكن.
يقولوا لأن المانجو بيموت فجأة طالع عيونه.
المانجو بالذات كذا لا المانجو عنده هذه الميزة هي اسمه osmotic adjustment. ما حضر منه عين ولا شيء. طبعا هذا يكون مار قبلها بيوم. إن شاء الله الثامن ولا امبارح. وهو كذا ترى لأنه كانت certain plants can. Which is a good strategy. I mean, if it is in the right environment, because rain will come, and then you did not sacrifice anything. Photosynthesis can shuttle maximum, everything is working fine, it's all good, but it's not working for this kind of environments. Of course, you need to irrigate it. You have to sense it. How do you know it is already ready for photosynthesis? Because all you need to do infrared thermometer. نستخدمه أيام COVID. If you direct it toward this kind of mango, it's very hot. You could see it's hot. Because it's lacking water, there's no cooling happening. Very low water, it has no water. So you can actually know ahead of time that the tree is going to collapse. And that's why, also another reason why ceratocystis is so, there's also typical symptoms of mango decline. Some sudden decline. It's the same thing. الفرق انه الفطر يسكر الزايلم والنبت fine ما فيها شيء. Because of osmotic adjustment they stay fine. هم يحسبوا انه ماشي ماي يعني ما يحسبوا انه متسكر اصلا السtem. It's not moving. The water is not moving to the leaves. وهناك في فطر جاز الفطر. والwater is slowly being blocked. It doesn't move. والنبات ترى يفكر انه مثل الجفاف يعني عادي مرطب بعد فتره شوي سخون. هو اصلا يسكر الزايلم ما يخلي الماء يطلع الفطر هذا Photosynthesis. So it stays fine until one day the whole thing wilted and the whole thing collapsed. And why it's only one branch؟ لانه هو ذاك اللي فيه الاصابه اللي فيه الفطر هذاك الستيم. فقط that branch or that stem احيانا شيره كامله يعتمد وين الاصابه موجوده. The other branches are fine now temporarily until that day comes when that also collapses. So that's what happens with something called osmotic adjustment. عندي إن شاء الله هذا الموضوع. And this happens in certain kinds of trees, not all of them, but in some of them. متى يعطوني أقلام زين؟ هذا من أيام الستينات. osmotic adjustment. When the stomata remains open, so CO2 will get in, photosynthesis happens, but also water is lost slowly. The plant stayed turgid, right? The tree stays turgid like this until all of a sudden there's no more water. It collapses all at once, and that's what sudden wilting. It is a disease or lack of irrigation or any other reason. ولا ضرب عين ولا أي شيء. يعني that what when that happens, that thing happens. So that is the reason why the plant loses it. So light is very important for this part. That's how transpiration is affected by dry weather. Okay, dry weather, like that's what causes midday wilting point. Then this is the process. Transpiration causes the plant to lose water faster than it can replace from the roots. Remember, this cannot be treated by irrigation because there's water actually in the soil. There's no problem. حتى لو كانت في بحيرة ما عندك, that's not the problem. You are tackling the wrong problem. Irrigation is not going to help. Cooling will help, but not irrigating. So in this course, the guard cells will close slowly down to slow down the enabling the plant to conserve water. But if this continues, of course, it's going to reduce photosynthesis and it will collapse altogether. So this whole process is just like this for transpiration. It's driven by something called water potential. المصطلح جديد أنا أخذه تفاصيله في محاضرة غيرها. But we have something called water potential. احنا عندنا جزئيتين, يعني الجزئية هذه مال الغاز اكسشينج, جزئية الووتر بوتنشال اللي هي لازم نعرفها. water potential سمعت عنه قبل, هو هذا. طبعا هو how much potential يعني the energy inside the water that moves from the soil to the atmosphere. And that has a gradient driven by the concentration of solutes inside the water. هو اللي يحركه اصلا. ما يحركوا طاقة الجاذبية لأنه ماشي ضد الجاذبية. ذكروا المحاضرة ليش هو ماشي ضد الجاذبية أصلا. So it's moved by concentration of the solute inside. There's more than one. Total water potential is more than one factor. But the main one is inside the plant is solute potential, which is actually different than the soil. So we have gravity, water potential, we have solute. So water, soil to be taken by the plant, water potential will be lower than the soil. As you go, it's lower. It's negative. Water potential is negative energy. Okay, عشان يتحرك هو أصلاً لازم يكون more negative. So water potential in the root is less than water potential in the soil. That means what? The concentration of solutes. يعني خلي مثل الإكس ماء وسكر. Right? يعني in the soil it has 1 spoon of sugar in the soil. How many spoons of sugar you need in the root عشان يتحرك مثل الماء؟ You need to have 2. So the water will move from the soil to the roots. You have to have that differential in water potential, in concentration of solutes inside the water. So that needs to go through. And then more concentrated in the stem and more concentrated in the leaf. So naturally, it is more concentrated in the leaf. And also leaf here, they produce sugar. So the highest concentration, the lowest water potential is in the leaf. And then it escapes from there to the atmosphere. So we have the root, the soil, and the root, the stem, the leaf, and the atmosphere. So the gradient, if you look at the water potential, not the solute, the total water potential, it declines as the water moves through the plant. أرطب مكان وين؟ تربة. أجف مكان وين؟ الهواء. So it moves in that direction from the wet to the dry. نفس الفكرة اللي في الباوندري لاير، نفس الفكرة اللي هي حركة الماء دائما إذا جبت اسفنجة رطبة جف. كيف جف؟ الاسفنجة الرطبة هذه جف. لأنه الماء it was wet, right? So the water vapor moved from that sponge to the atmosphere because it is drier. But if there's high humidity, it will take more time for the sponge to dry, right? And if you put it in water, it will never dry because the water is more wet than the sponge. Hello, the water is more wet. Okay. That's how it is. So we have, that's how it moves. Okay, فهو دائما there's a gradient. So the gradient here also the same thing. So atmosphere will have to be lower than the leaf, so the water will just go that direction. So most of the water in the plant is actually a function of the root that being absorbing this water, and it moves. There are two ways the plant or the water moves from the soil to the plant. There are two ways. One is called apoplastic, and symplastic, two ways. And you have both there. But that's how the water moves from the soil to the plant. So water is transported from the root to the leaf, and then from the leaf to the atmosphere. That's how it is. So the key word here is water potential. It has to be different between the soil, the root, stem, the leaf, the atmosphere. And this is continuous, and that's why it is called soil, plant, atmosphere continuum. لأنه لو انقص الحبل ده خرب الدنيا. It has to be tightly controlled. حركة الماء من soil to the root is controlled, وحركة الماء from the leaf, from the plant through the leaf to the atmosphere is also highly controlled. Okay. So this movement is actually physical movement. It's most of it is physical. It's not active. It is passive. The plant doesn't cost the plant any energy to do it. It's just a gradient from the soil all the way to the atmosphere. But the movement of nutrients and sugars from the leaf to the other part of the plant is active through the phloem. Most of the water moves through xylem, remember. Xylem. That's where the water moves. And now you know why it moves and what happens when it moves. So this is the last slide for this part. The plant grows when photosynthesis and respiration and transpiration are all in balance. أي خلل في واحد منهم يخرب الدنيا. So that's how it is. We have water and nutrients in the soil taken up by the plant. Happy fruits and leaves, good quality fruits, big size, tasty, sweet. The water leaves the plant by transpiration. Oxygen is produced and used for respiration. CO2 is being absorbed for photosynthesis, changing the token of energy from physical energy from the sun to chemical energy after breaking down of the sugars as a result of photosynthesis. So it's all balanced, everything is nice. And you know the cycle. The CO2 is being absorbed again by the plant, release oxygen, animals absorb oxygen, also respire, and the cycle continues. The amazing thing is that you only respire, you don't photosynthesize. So you humans do this, respiration and transpiration. Respiration. العربية. Respiration. You don't actually do transpiration. But it is almost transpiration. بس هي اسمها غير. Respiration. And so you don't do photosynthesis. The plant does that for you. But for you to do these two, you need food that is given to you by plants. Even if you eat animals or fish or anything else, that thing fed on something that ate another thing that actually came from a plant. So the cycle goes like this. And then once you do that, the plant doesn't want anything from you. It wanted just CO2. And you give it CO2. And life continues. Very nice, right? It's all about energy. So you are part of that. This makes you think that you are only a small part of this world. You're not like them. But you can be very destructive and destroying everything as a human. Do you have any questions on this part? I think this is good for now. Inshallah, next week, just we'll do another topic. هذا next week. Huh?
You said that water transport of shapes, that acid wave, that's active.
Yes.
So it will be physical, not chemical.
No, I mean no energy. Gas means no energy is used to move it.
So energy required.
Yes. Well, as you said, it's technically physical too. It's like the movement of the light from the sun to the plant. There's no carrier. Yeah, the plant doesn't consume any energy actually to move the water. For the most part. When things gets very tricky, then it does use energy. But if the water is abundant, more balanced, everything is okay, it's all physical. And that's when you get the maximum growth, the maximum yield, because all the conditions are right. Enough water in the soil, perfect weather, no balanced, like everything is balanced, respiration, transpiration. Even fighting like pathogen consumes a lot of energy by the plant in respiration. And that's what makes the plant weak, because the amount of energy being used to fight pathogens is a lot more than the plant can make. So when you have water stress, heat stress, any kind of stress, or insect attack, or pathogenic attacks, the plant tries to defend itself, and it uses a lot of the energy that's supposed to be used for growth to control these pathogens, fight them back. And as I said before, what you see now, the visible symptoms are خلاص يعني after a long fight. يعني it's not immediate. The pathogen has been there for many days now, or weeks maybe. And when there's a balance, it doesn't matter. But if the balance is not there, then we have a problem. Then the plants start to lose a lot of the energy to fight, like you now. Why do you get hot? Because you are fighting a virus or a pathogen. That heat is actually respiration. It consumes your energy, the energy that you have. That's why you feel weak. And at the same time, you cannot photosynthesize, you cannot eat. Right? You cannot make yourself eat. So you become very weak, very sick. You're supposed to be strong and you continue to have energy intake, eat, sharper. Your life becomes better. Then you start to fight again. And then after a while, your body will fight and then you'll win. You'll be fine after a few days. But during that time, you consumed a lot of energy. You're hot because of the respiration, and your body is trying to fight this pathogen by elevating the heat, right, to kill it, to kill the virus. But if it gets too hot, like I don't know, 38 degrees or something, then your brain will start to be fried. You are at risk of losing your some of your major functions, and so you need to actually work it, get some medicine and so on. You need help at that time. That's why some of us are easy, and you get sick and then you'll be fine. You don't go to take a medicine or some of us can't do that. Too weak to fight. So we need help right away. The same thing for plants too. And the plant has an elaborate network to fight these kind of invaders. Not just so many chemicals being released and so on.
For the mango in decline, we cut the branch. That's already killing and fertility.
Yes.
So this will help plants to overcome this stress.
No, the problem with the pathogen is it's actually existing throughout. Unless you ensure that the part that's not infected will not be infected. But if it is infected, it's too late. I mean, it's just a matter of time until you see the infection. But some of these mangoes are resistant, or at least tolerant. The pathogen is there, but it cannot block all these items, or the plant is fast to replace the blocked with new ones, and so it can survive. It will still affect it though, because it blocks the xylem. The problem with substance blocks the xylem. But in most cases, it's blocked. If the tree is large, it blocks one xylem, one branch. Or you see the symptoms one branch, and then the next branch, and then the third branch. In some cases, you see the whole tree is gone. And in some trees, they are tolerant. They are still blocked, but they replace it quickly, faster than the rate of the fungi blocking. So it will survive still. But I don't know if they found a solution to this fungi. Usually, fungus is not complicated to control. Phytoplasma is a problem because you can't do it in the lab. You have to do it in the field. Certain bacteria also are challenging, but something like Fusarium, بعض الفيروسات it's challenging, but it can be done. So that's the story. Do you have anything to add to the story that we have? Or we just do it? This will be for next time. This will be focused only on photosynthesis. And a little bit, because transpiration is part of the water movement. Also understand the concept, practically you understand transpiration. Photosynthesis and respiration is next. In more detail. Looking at the light, the spectrum of the light, looking at some of these. What happens to the thing. It's already converted to zero. Yeah, they're ready. I didn't upload them yet. The other one's already there, but not this one.